Imagine going to a routine checkup, expecting the same old appointment, but what you walk away with turns your entire world upside down. This is exactly what happened to one mother who, after years of raising her beloved daughter, would learn a truth that no one could have ever predicted. Picture this. You're sitting in your doctor's office, hearing those mundane words, but suddenly, the conversation takes an unexpected turn. The routine tests you've had all your life have unearthed something so astonishing it could shatter everything you thought you knew. What if I told you that after all these years, the girl you've cared for, the girl you've watched grow, wasn't your daughter at all? I know, it sounds impossible, doesn't it? Yet, for one woman, this jaw-dropping reality would soon become her life. Welcome to a story that'll leave you questioning the very fabric of family. It starts with a simple, everyday visit to the doctor, but it ends with a revelation that no one could ever prepare for. A DNA test, a mother's unwavering love, and a shocking truth. You might be asking, how could this happen? What caused the mix-up? Well, stay with me because in the next few minutes you'll hear about the kind of twist that makes you reconsider everything you know about identity, family, and trust. Stick around until the end because I promise you, the answer to that burning question will blow your mind. Trust me, you won't believe how the story unfolds. Now, let's rewind a little. Picture this. A young mother, thrilled to be pregnant, eagerly awaiting the birth of her child. It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. She had a picture-perfect pregnancy, a little girl on the way, a dream come true. But little did she know, her life was about to take an unimaginable turn. She had no idea that when she gave birth to her baby girl, the hospital had made a mistake, one that would go unnoticed for years, hiding in plain sight. The wrong baby was sent home with her. Years of bonding, laughter, first steps, and milestones, all with a child she thought was hers. But as her daughter grew, so did the doubts, little things she couldn't quite explain away. Maybe it was the way she looked, the things she said, or the way she acted. None of it made sense. There were moments when she just couldn't shake that feeling deep inside, that something wasn't right. But like most parents, she brushed it off, dismissing it as normal parenting concerns. After all, every kid is different, right? But here's the thing, sometimes our instincts are more powerful than we realize. Something deep inside her mother's heart never quite felt at ease. And so, one day, when the opportunity presented itself to confirm a suspicion she had brushed aside for so long, she took a leap of faith and ordered a simple DNA test. A routine checkup, a standard test, a moment that would change her life forever. What came back wasn't just a mismatch of genetics, it was the confirmation of the unthinkable. Her daughter wasn't hers. Her entire world had just been upended by the truth. Now, let me ask you this. What would you do if you discovered the child you'd raised for years wasn't your biological daughter? How would you cope with such a revelation? What would that do to your sense of identity as a parent? This woman had raised this child with all the love, dedication, and care in the world. How could the reality of the situation possibly match the emotional connection she had built over all these years? Let me make one thing clear. This isn't just about genetics. It's not just about bloodlines. This is about the profound bond that forms between a mother and her child. It's about the unspoken love, the shared experiences, and the memories that shape who we are. The thought of being separated from a child you've loved and cared for, the feeling that someone else might be raising your real child, is almost too much to bear. The impact is both profound and overwhelming. And this mother, faced with this heart-wrenching truth, now has to navigate a storm of emotions, shock, disbelief, anger, sorrow, while still holding on to the love she has for the girl she's known all her life. But here's where the story gets even more complicated. The hospital. Yes, the very institution where she trusted the lives of both her child and herself, was the one responsible for the mix-up. It was a mistake that wasn't just a tiny slip-up, it was a colossal error with unimaginable consequences. And yet, for years, no one noticed. The truth was kept hidden, a secret buried so deep that it would take a simple test to bring it to light. So, what happens next? How does this mother cope with the heartbreak of knowing her daughter was never really hers? How does the real mother of the girl she thought was her child come to terms with the loss of her daughter, the child she gave birth to but was never able to raise? But before we dive into the emotional roller coaster that follows, let me tell you this. What happens next in this story will challenge everything you thought you knew about family, about love, and about how life can change in the blink of an eye. This is just the beginning of a journey that leads to unexpected twists, gut-wrenching decisions, and the search for answers that could take years to uncover. As the days passed after receiving the shocking DNA test results, the weight of the discovery hung heavily over the mother, leaving her unable to shake the thoughts that constantly swirled in her mind. Every day, she woke up with the same unsettling feeling, as if the world she'd known for years had dissolved into a fog of doubt and confusion. Her daughter, the little girl she had lovingly raised, had been her world. From the first moments of her birth, she had been there for every step, every milestone, every birthday, every struggle, and every triumph. But now, in an instant, everything she had known was called into question. Could it be true? Could the hospital, a place she had trusted her life and the life of her child, have made such a catastrophic mistake? It wasn't that she didn't want to believe the test results. How could she? How could anyone? It was as if the ground had been pulled out from under her, and there she was, left floating in a sea of unanswered questions. To make matters worse, the uncertainty in her heart was only amplified by the fact that no one else had any answers either. Her husband, still in disbelief, had started to retreat into himself, unable to fully comprehend what was happening. Friends who had once been a constant source of support now seemed distant, unsure of what to say. And her daughter, her sweet, bright-eyed girl, was just as confused, though in a different way. She had no idea that her life had just been irrevocably changed. She continued on with her usual routine, oblivious to the storm that was brewing just beneath the surface. The tension continued to build, and just when she thought she was starting to connect the dots, another unexpected twist came her way. One evening, she went to meet with a private investigator, someone who had been highly recommended by a friend. He was a man named Jake, who had a reputation for being thorough and relentless when it came to solving complex cases. But when they met, Jake didn't seem like the man she had imagined. There was something off about him, something that didn't sit right. He seemed overly eager to take on the case, almost too eager, and yet, every time she asked him a direct question about his past or his connections to the hospital, he dodged the topic, offering only vague answers. When she pressed him for details, his calm demeanor shifted, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of unease in his eyes. "I think it's better if you let me handle this, okay?" he said, his tone suddenly sharp. "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." But there was no trust in his eyes. The more she observed him, the more she began to question his motivations. Could he really be trusted? Or was he just another part of the puzzle, a pawn in a much larger game? The final blow came when the mother was reviewing old family photos, searching for anything that could offer a clue. That's when she noticed something strange. One of the photos of her daughter, taken shortly after birth, appeared to have been altered. At first glance, it looked like a perfectly innocent snapshot, but upon closer inspection, she could see that there was something odd about the background. There were shadowy figures lurking just out of focus, figures that weren't there when the photo was originally taken. Was it a trick of the light? Or was someone intentionally tampering with the evidence to cover up the truth? She tried to trace the origin of the photo, but every attempt to get to the bottom of it led her to more dead ends. At this point, the walls were closing in on her from every angle. The more she tried to uncover the truth, the more she felt like she was being pushed further and further into a corner. Was someone intentionally sabotaging her efforts? Who could she trust in a situation where no one seemed to have her best interests at heart? The mother knew she had to make a decision soon. Would she keep going, risking everything to uncover the truth, or would she walk away, leaving the mystery unsolved and the people responsible for the switch unpunished? But just as she was about to make a decision, she received a letter, an anonymous letter, postmarked from an unknown location. The words written on the paper were simple but chilling. "Stop looking. You don't want to know the truth. The letter was unsigned, but the threat was clear. Someone knew she was getting closer, and they were willing to stop her at any cost. As the mother sat there, staring at the chilling letter in her hands, the weight of it all began to sink in. She could feel the walls closing in on her, the threat too real to ignore, yet she refused to back down. But little did she know, this wasn't the only warning she would receive. The very next day, while she was deep in thought, trying to piece together the tangled web of lies that had been spun around her, a knock at the door broke the silence. When she opened it, she was startled to see her sister, Rachel, standing there, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. In her hand, she held an envelope, identical to the one the mother had received just days before. Rachel didn't have to say anything. Her shaking hands and the look in her eyes said it all. She had received the same anonymous message. "I think they're watching us," Rachel whispered, her voice trembling. "I found this outside my house this morning. It's exactly like the one you got." The gravity of the situation hit the mother like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just her anymore. Whoever was behind this was going after her family, and that made everything far more dangerous. If Rachel was involved, it meant that there was someone out there with far more influence than the mother had realized. Someone with a lot of power who wasn't afraid to play dirty. The two sisters sat down at the kitchen table, exchanging fearful glances as they read the message together. It was short, cryptic, and laced with a veiled threat. "This goes deeper than you think. Stay away from the past, or you'll regret it. No signatures. No return address. Just a warning." But for all the fear in the air, something else gnawed at the mother's mind. How could they know about Rachel? How had they known to target her as well? Was it a coincidence? Or was Rachel somehow involved in the mystery too? The mother's gut twisted as she realized that the more she uncovered, the more her entire family seemed to be dragged into the chaos. The people behind these messages weren't just trying to intimidate her, they were trying to tear her apart, piece by piece. The next day, as if to further complicate things, the mother received a call from Jake, the private investigator she had met weeks ago. His voice sounded strained, hurried, like he was trying to keep something from her. "I've been digging into this more," he said, his tone lower than usual, "and I think I've found something that's going to shake things up. You need to meet me. It's important," she agreed, though a sense of unease settled in her chest. Why hadn't he shared this information over the phone? Why this secrecy? When she met him later that afternoon at a quiet diner, Jake wasted no time getting to the point. "I found something that contradicts what we've believed so far," he said, sliding a piece of paper across the table toward her. It was an old document, one that looked like it had been buried for years, possibly decades. The mother's heart raced as she scanned the text. The birth records of her daughter were not the same as what had been filed at the hospital. According to this document, her daughter wasn't born in the hospital she had thought, nor on the date she had believed. Instead, the records indicated a completely different location, a different date, and a different name. It was as if the entire timeline of her life had been rewritten. This discovery rocked the very foundation of what she had been led to believe about her daughter's birth. But as she stared at the paper, something didn't sit right. Who had altered the records? And why had Jake not told her about this sooner? His behavior felt off, too calculated, too careful. Was he still working in her best interest, or was he playing a game of his own? Before she could process the full weight of this revelation, the waitress brought over their drinks, and with it, the tension in the air seemed to shift. She noticed Jake glance nervously over his shoulder, his eyes darting around the room. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost a whisper. "Look, you're not going to like this, but I need to be upfront. I've been approached by someone else, someone with a lot of influence, and they've asked me to stop working on your case. I think they're trying to warn me off." His words hung in the air like a bomb, and the mother could feel the blood drain from her face. Who could possibly have the power to silence a private investigator like Jake? And more importantly, why hadn't he told her about this earlier? Had he been playing both sides all along? Jake's next words did little to ease her growing suspicion. "They told me if I didn't drop it, I'd be putting you and your family in even more danger." He met her eyes with a look of sincerity, but it didn't reach his voice. Something wasn't right. She could sense it in the way his hands fidgeted, the way his words faltered. Suddenly, everything felt more complicated. Was Jake an ally, or was he part of the conspiracy? And if he was involved, who else could she trust? The new information he had brought only raised more questions than answers. The birth records were a key piece of evidence that, if true, could blow the entire case wide open, but if Jake had been compromised, then how could she be sure of anything? The realization that she might be surrounded by people with hidden motives, people who weren't who they appeared to be, made the mother's skin crawl. Each step forward seemed to lead her 2 steps back, and every lead she followed only made the conspiracy seem even more complex, more tangled. The clock was ticking, and the threats were getting closer. Every new discovery felt like a piece of a puzzle she wasn't sure she could solve. Just when the stakes seemed to reach their breaking point, another twist unfolded. That night, as the mother and Rachel talked late into the evening, a loud knock echoed from the front door. When the mother opened it, she was met by a man in a dark suit, his face partially obscured by shadows. He didn't say a word at first, but when he handed her an envelope with a thick wax seal, his gaze told her everything she needed to know. She opened it slowly, her fingers trembling. Inside, she found a single photograph, a picture of her daughter, taken just hours after birth. But there was something horrifying about it. In the background of the image, standing just behind the hospital staff, was a face the mother knew all too well, a face she never expected to see again. The person in the photo was someone she had once trusted, someone close to her family, someone she had never suspected of being involved in the deception. The revelation sent a shock through her system, one that left her breathless, her mind reeling with more questions than ever. Who was this person, and what role had they played in the secret that had been kept from her for so long? Now, more than ever, the mother understood that the truth was slipping further and further away from her grasp. The stakes were higher, the danger greater, and the people she thought she could trust were now looking more and more like suspects. As the mystery deepened, one thing became clear. The closer she got to the truth, the more everything she thought she knew was unraveling. And the question remained, who was pulling the strings behind the scenes, and what did they stand to lose if the truth was exposed? With every step forward, the mystery only grew darker, and the answers seemed further out of reach than ever. Would she be able to uncover the truth before it was too late, or would the forces against her finally succeed in silencing her? The next few days passed in a blur, but they were anything but ordinary. The threats were becoming more tangible now, more real, and the mother could no longer deny the growing sense of dread creeping into every corner of her life. The once quiet, familiar streets she'd walked 1,000 times now felt like a trap, and the house, which had always been a sanctuary, began to feel like a cage. The phone calls, the messages, they never stopped, each one more ominous than the last. Each one a reminder that she was being watched, that whoever was behind this knew everything. Even the people closest to her, Rachel, Jake, felt like potential enemies. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was a hidden agenda, something even darker lurking beneath the surface. That morning, as she walked out of her front door, she noticed something unusual. It was a small thing, barely noticeable, but to someone as paranoid as she had become, it was enough to stop her cold. A car was parked across the street. It had been there for hours, parked in the same spot, with the engine off, the windows slightly tinted. It wasn't unusual for someone to park on that street, but something about it felt wrong. The car wasn't just sitting there, it was waiting. She glanced at it again, trying to calm herself, but when she did, the driver's side window was rolling down slowly, revealing only a shadowy figure. The hair on the back of her neck stood up, and her heart skipped a beat. Was it someone she knew? No, it couldn't be. But the sense of danger was unmistakable, and before she could process what was happening, the car sped off, tires screeching against the pavement. The feeling of being watched didn't leave her all day. Everywhere she went, she felt eyes on her. Strangers on the street, people in cars, people who seemed to be passing by with far too much interest in her every move. She tried to shake it off, but the unease gnawed at her. And then the unthinkable happened. Late that evening, after a long, exhausting day of trying to make sense of the cryptic messages and unsettling discoveries, she returned home to find that Rachel was gone. No note, no phone call, nothing. Just her things, her purse, her phone, her keys, left behind. Panic surged through her veins as she frantically called her sister's number, only to hear the voicemail pick up again and again. Rachel was missing. The person she'd been closest to, the one who had been by her side through all of this, had disappeared without a trace. The rational part of her mind told her not to jump to conclusions, that Rachel could have just stepped out, but the fear in her chest told her otherwise. This was no coincidence. Whoever was behind all this had just made their move. The police weren't much help. They couldn't even confirm if Rachel had been seen leaving her house, and with no evidence of foul play, they were reluctant to take the case seriously. But the mother knew better. She had seen the signs. She had felt the weight of the threat, and now it was impossible to ignore. Whoever had been sending the messages, whoever had been manipulating her life from the shadows, was escalating the situation. They were now targeting her family. And Rachel had become the latest pawn in this twisted game. Desperation led her to take matters into her own hands. She drove around the city for hours, scanning the streets for any sign of Rachel's car, but there was nothing. The city that had once been so familiar now felt like a maze, its streets twisting and turning, closing in on her. Just as she was about to give up and head back home, a call came through. It was an unknown number, and her heart skipped as she answered. "I have your sister," a voice on the other end said, its tone calm, almost eerily so. "If you want to see her again, you'll stop digging. Stop asking questions. Leave the past alone." The line went dead before she could even speak, leaving her in stunned silence. She was shaking, clutching the phone so tightly her fingers ached. This wasn't a warning anymore, it was a threat. A direct, personal threat. The fear was suffocating, but there was something else creeping in now, something darker, more insidious. Paranoia. Could she trust anyone? Was Jake involved, too? Was Rachel's disappearance part of some elaborate scheme to get her to back off? Or was there someone else, someone even closer to her, who was orchestrating all of this from behind the scenes? The question burned at the back of her mind, but she couldn't answer it. Not yet. She didn't even know where to start. By now, every corner she turned felt like a trap. She couldn't escape the suffocating weight of fear that followed her, like a shadow. She began to see things that weren't there. A car tailing her down the highway, a figure in a store window that disappeared when she turned to look. Were these just figments of her imagination? Or was she being watched even more closely than she realized? Every knock at the door, every sound in the night, made her jump. The silence in the house was deafening, and it pressed in on her until she couldn't breathe. The weight of it all was taking its toll on her, and as she sat alone in the dark, trying to make sense of the mess her life had become, something inside her began to break. The fear was no longer just about Rachel or the unknown threats. It was about her own sanity. The longer this went on, the more she began to feel like she was losing herself. Every decision, every move, felt like it could be the wrong one. She tried to focus, tried to push through the fog of confusion and dread, but it was getting harder and harder to see the truth through the growing darkness. What had she done to deserve this? What had Rachel done? And more importantly, who was behind it all? Was this some twisted game? Or was it something even more sinister? With each new twist, the lines between friend and foe blurred further, and the mystery deepened to a point where it seemed like the truth would never come. As the days wore on, the pressure only mounted. The phone calls kept coming, the threats more urgent, more direct. It wasn't just about uncovering the past anymore, it was about survival. And as the walls closed in around her, she realized one thing with cold clarity. Whoever was behind this, they were prepared to do whatever it took to keep the truth buried. And now, it seemed, they were willing to destroy anyone who stood in their way. Would she find Rachel before it was too late? Or would she be the next target in a game that had no rules, no mercy? The mystery only deepened, and the stakes had never been higher. As the days passed, the mother's desperation only grew. Each attempt to find Rachel or uncover the truth only seemed to pull her deeper into a labyrinth of confusion and fear. Every lead turned into a dead end, every question more complicated than the last. But then, on the 5th day after Rachel's disappearance, a breakthrough came when she received a cryptic message, this one different from the others. It was a letter, not a phone call or text, but an old-fashioned envelope with no return address. She hesitated for a moment before tearing it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the handwriting unmistakably familiar. "Stop searching. It's already too late." Her heart sank as she recognized the handwriting. It was Rachel's. But it didn't make sense. How could Rachel have written this, yet be missing at the same time? Was she being forced to send this message? The words, cryptic as they were, sent a chill through her spine. The letter felt like a warning, but also a message from someone trapped in their own game, trapped by something far bigger than her. Was Rachel alive? Was she writing under duress, or was she trying to tell her something in a code that only she would understand? The mystery, which had already been suffocating, took a more surreal turn when the mother found an unexpected ally. One evening, as she sat in her kitchen, trying to piece together the shattered fragments of her life, her phone rang. This time, it was not an anonymous call, but a name that caught her off guard. Jake. Her heart raced as she answered. "I know who's behind this." Jake's voice came through the phone, low and urgent. "You're not going to believe me, but I need you to trust me. I never wanted you to find out this way." Confusion and dread hit her like a freight train. Jake had been a constant presence, someone she had relied on through it all, someone she thought was on her side. But now, his words were unsettling, and there was something in his voice that made her uneasy. He continued, his tone shaky. "It's me, it's always been me," Jake whispered, before falling silent. At first, she thought she'd misheard him. How could it possibly be him? Jake, the man she had trusted, the one who had been so supportive? He had helped her through everything, the sleepless nights, the endless searching, the dread. But now it seemed as if his involvement was deeper than she could have ever imagined. His confession, though cryptic, shattered everything she had come to believe. He explained that there were secrets, hidden layers to their lives that she had never known. Secrets that went back long before Rachel had disappeared, before the threats had begun. Jake told her that their family wasn't what she thought it was, that the answers she had been searching for were buried far deeper than a mere birth mix-up. The truth was far darker than she could ever have imagined, and it was a truth that he had been forced to keep from her for her own protection. But now, with Rachel's life hanging in the balance, it was time to reveal everything. Jake's voice cracked as he continued. "There's someone else who's been controlling everything. Someone close to you, someone you've trusted your entire life." Her mind reeled. Could it be true? Could the person who had been manipulating her entire world, pulling strings from the shadows, be someone she never expected? Was the game she had been caught in more intricate and dangerous than she'd thought? For the first time, she felt the walls closing in, and she had no idea who she could trust anymore. Just as she was about to demand more answers, Jake dropped another bombshell that nearly shattered her. "You're not Rachel's real mother." The words felt like a slap to the face. She froze, the room spinning.
How could he say that? What was he talking about?
She had raised Rachel. She had loved her like her own. This couldn't be true. It didn't make sense. But Jake, despite his faltering voice, seemed certain. "You've been living a lie," Jake continued, his tone somber. "Rachel is not your biological daughter. There's more to your past, to Rachel's past, than you've been told. Everything's been hidden from you, for a reason. I never wanted to be the one to tell you, but it's the only way you'll understand what's really going on." The shock of his words knocked the breath out of her. The entire foundation of her life, her relationship with Rachel, everything she thought she knew, was it all a lie? Could it be possible that Rachel wasn't hers? And if that was true, who was she really? The questions flooded her mind, but the answers were nowhere to be found. She tried to steady her breathing, her mind racing for answers, for something that made sense. But no clarity came, just more confusion. In that moment, something dark and sinister clicked into place. Jake's cryptic warnings, Rachel's sudden disappearance, the threats, all of it had been building to this one undeniable conclusion. The truth wasn't what she thought it was. Everything she had known about her life had been manipulated, distorted by people with motives far beyond her comprehension. As her head spun with the weight of Jake's words, she knew one thing for certain. Nothing was as it seemed, and everything she thought she understood about her family, about Rachel, was about to come crashing down in a way that would change everything forever. The truth was out there, hidden behind layers of deceit and manipulation. But finding it and surviving it was going to be harder than she could ever have imagined. The stakes had never been higher, and now, more than ever, she needed to decide who she could trust and whether uncovering the truth was worth the cost. The weight of the truth crushed down on her, each word Jake had spoken twisting into something darker and more terrifying with every passing minute. The more she thought about it, the more she realized just how much was at stake, not just Rachel's life, but her own, and perhaps everything she had ever known. The uncertainty hung in the air, a suffocating presence, as she sat in her kitchen staring at her phone, Jake's cryptic words echoing in her mind. Her entire world had been turned upside down in a matter of days, and the only thing she was certain of was that she no longer knew who she could trust. The next day, she received a text message that nearly made her heart stop. It was from someone she had never expected, her own mother. The message was short, almost too short, and yet it was enough to send shivers down her spine. "I know what you're trying to do. You need to stop. This isn't the path you want to go down." She stared at the screen, unable to make sense of it. Her mother? What was she talking about? Why would her own mother be telling her to stop searching for Rachel, especially after everything that had happened? Was she involved in this somehow? Had she known all along? The questions piled up one after another, each more confusing than the last. She had always trusted her mother, had always believed in the safety of their family bond, but now everything was coming into question. A few hours later, the phone rang again. She hesitated, her hand shaking as she picked it up. It was her mother's voice, but there was something different about it this time. Something colder, more distant. "Listen to me. You don't know what you're dealing with," her mother said, her voice tight with emotion. "You're in too deep, and you need to stop. I'm telling you this for your own good. If you keep going, there's no telling what might happen to you or Rachel." Every word was a knife, each one cutting deeper than the last. It felt like a warning, but also a threat. The coldness in her mother's voice made her stomach churn with a deep, unsettling dread. Was this some kind of sick joke? Or was there something far darker at play here? Could her mother, the one person she had trusted above all others, be involved in something so sinister? She couldn't bring herself to believe it, but the seeds of doubt had already been planted. The pull to keep going, to find Rachel and unravel the truth, was too strong. She couldn't stop now. Not after everything she had learned, and not when Rachel's life hung in the balance. But as the hours passed, she began to realize that the deeper she dug, the more dangerous things became. It wasn't just Rachel she was putting at risk. It was herself, and possibly everyone she cared about. Later that night, as she lay in bed, exhausted but restless, her phone rang again. This time it was an unknown number. She hesitated before answering, her pulse quickening as she brought the phone to her ear. "Your search for Rachel is pointless," the voice on the other end said, low and menacing. "We've been watching you. If you don't stop now, we will take everything from you. The truth isn't worth it. Walk away while you still can." She felt her breath catch in her throat. Who was this? What did they mean by taking everything? Was this a new threat from whoever was behind Rachel's disappearance? Or was it a sign that her own family, maybe even her mother, was part of something far bigger than she had ever imagined? The ultimatum hung in the air like a guillotine ready to fall. She had no choice but to make a decision, one that could either save her or destroy her. Her mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Could she walk away from everything and live with the guilt of never knowing what had happened to Rachel? Or should she press on, no matter the cost, no matter how deep she had to dig, knowing that the price might be more than she could bear? She had always believed that family was everything, that love could overcome any obstacle. But now, as the walls closed in and her options dwindled, she was faced with a heart-wrenching choice: sacrifice everything she had fought for to protect herself and her family, or risk it all to uncover the truth about Rachel's disappearance. And if she chose the latter, could she live with what she might find? Could she ever forgive herself if the truth was worse than she had imagined? The emotional weight of the decision pressed down on her, the uncertainty eating away at her resolve. What if she was too late? What if Rachel was already lost to her forever? The fear of never finding the truth, of never knowing what had really happened to her daughter, gnawed at her from within. But the fear of uncovering something so dark, so horrific, that she might never be able to look at her family the same way again, was almost worse. As the night wore on, her phone rang once more. This time, there was no voice. Just a single, chilling text message. "You can't trust anyone. Not even yourself." The words cut through her like ice. It was a warning, but it was also a reminder that she was alone in this fight. Alone, and trapped in a web of deceit that seemed to stretch far beyond anything she could have imagined. Her thoughts spun wildly as she tried to process everything that had happened, every piece of the puzzle that had come so close to fitting, but now it was as if the pieces were shifting in front of her eyes. She had no idea who was friend, who was foe, and who was playing their own dangerous game. The phone call earlier, the text messages, her mother's warnings, everything had become a blur of threats and confusion, pushing her toward a choice she wasn't ready to make. But with every passing minute, the walls seemed to be closing in around her, leaving her with no way out. The truth, whatever it was, had to be out there, hidden beneath layers of lies and manipulation. And the only way to get to it was to keep moving forward. But with each step she took, the danger grew. And soon, she would have to decide, how far was she willing to go to uncover the truth? The weight of the choices she had made, the decisions that had led her this far, were starting to bear down on her with a force she couldn't escape. She had pushed through fear, through doubt, but now, with the pieces falling into place, the enormity of what she was up against was too much to ignore. What had begun as a search for answers about Rachel's disappearance had spiraled into something far darker, something much more dangerous. She wasn't just uncovering the truth about one missing child. She was standing on the edge of a conspiracy that ran deeper and wider than she could have ever imagined. The phone call came late one night, her heart pounding before she even answered. This time, it wasn't an anonymous voice, and it wasn't a cryptic threat. It was her best friend, Emily, her voice trembling with fear. "You need to stop. You don't know what you're dealing with. It's bigger than you think." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. Emily? The same friend who had stood by her side through everything, who had helped her navigate the labyrinth of lies and hidden truths. Now she was warning her to back off. Her mind reeled as she tried to make sense of it. Was Emily involved? Was she one of the people behind the web of deception that had ensnared them all? "No, she stammered, but Emily cut her off. "It's not just about Rachel anymore. You're in too deep. If you don't stop now, you're going to get yourself killed. You need to trust me." Emily's voice shook with desperation, and for the first time, she heard a crack of fear in it, a fear that mirrored her own. But trust was a luxury she no longer had. As the words sank in, she felt a chill run through her veins. It was happening again. Someone else was trying to control the narrative, to steer her away from the truth. But this time, it was someone she had always trusted. Someone who knew everything, or so it seemed. "Emily, what do you know? What's really going on?" she asked, her voice a mixture of frustration and fear. There was a long pause on the other end. Then, Emily's voice came through, quieter now, almost as though she was speaking through gritted teeth. "I can't say anything more. Just know this. If you keep going, they'll come for you. And they won't stop." Before she could respond, the line went dead. The silence that followed felt suffocating, a heavy weight pressing against her chest. What was Emily really saying? Who was they? She had always believed that her friend had been on her side, that together they could uncover the truth. But now she was questioning everything. Was Emily just trying to protect her, or was she part of the conspiracy, playing a role in something much larger than either of them had realized? The more she thought about it, the more she realized just how much she had underestimated the people around her. Jake had warned her, yes, but had he known more than he had let on? Had Emily been playing her all along? And was her own mother really the ally she had always believed her to be?
She didn't have time to dwell on that now.
What mattered was the next step. The truth about Rachel, about the conspiracy, was just within reach. She could feel it, the pieces of the puzzle slowly aligning, but every time she got closer, another obstacle appeared. It was as though someone or something was orchestrating events from behind the scenes, pulling the strings and making sure the truth stayed buried. And then it happened. A text message flashed on her screen. This time, it wasn't just a warning. It was a direct threat. "We know where you are. We know what you're looking for. If you keep digging, it will be the last thing you do." Her hands shook as she read it, her breath quickening with panic. Who had sent this? Was it Emily's warning coming true, or was it someone else? Her heart raced as her mind flashed to the last few days, the strange encounters, the veiled threats, the cryptic messages. All of it had led to this moment, this terrifying realization. Someone was actively hunting her, trying to silence her before she could expose the truth. She couldn't stop now. She couldn't back down, not when she was so close. But the danger was real, and it was closing in fast. Her phone buzzed again, a notification that made her blood run cold. A video, titled simply, "This is your last warning." She clicked it, her hand trembling as she watched the grainy footage on the screen. The video was of her, outside her house. She didn't need to look closely to see the figure lurking in the shadows, the unmistakable shape of a person watching her every move. It was clear now. Whoever was behind all of this had been watching her for weeks, maybe even longer. They knew everything about her, about Rachel, about the investigation, and they weren't going to stop until they had buried the truth for good. But there was something else in the video. A figure she didn't recognize. Someone who had been standing in the background, obscured by darkness. It was the first time she'd seen this person, and it was the first real clue she had to go on. Who was this person? Why had they been watching her? Her phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't a message. It was a call. She answered without hesitation, barely able to catch her breath. "Do you see it yet?" Jake's voice came through the line, rough and urgent. "Do you see what's really going on?" "What do you mean?" she gasped, her mind spinning with fear and confusion. "You think this is about Rachel. You think it's just about one missing child. But it's not. There are more of us. There are more of you, more people they've been keeping track of, watching, controlling. It's bigger than you think. And they're coming for all of us. You need to wake up. Wake up before it's too late." The finality in Jake's voice hit her like a slap. She was already too deep to pull out now, but it was clear. This wasn't just her fight anymore. She wasn't alone, but the people around her, the ones she thought she could trust, might be just as much a part of this conspiracy as the people who were pulling the strings from the shadows. The stakes had just been raised to an unimaginable level. And now, with her life on the line, she would have to fight not just for the truth, but for her very survival. The tension had been building for weeks, each new clue, each new threat, pushing her closer to the edge. Now, standing in front of the old, dilapidated building, the truth was finally within reach. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to turn back, to run, to protect herself. But she couldn't. Not when the final piece of the puzzle was here. Not when the stakes had escalated to this unimaginable level. The people who had orchestrated this entire nightmare had to be stopped, and she was the only one who could do it. Her heart pounded in her chest as she stepped into the darkness of the abandoned warehouse, the sound of her footsteps echoing through the empty space. The last few days had been a blur of frantic phone calls, cryptic messages, and near-death encounters. She had been followed, threatened, betrayed by those she trusted most. But none of that mattered now. She had one chance to uncover the truth, and she wasn't going to let fear stop her. Inside, the cold air cut through her skin like a knife. The warehouse felt empty, abandoned, but she knew better. The shadows held secrets, and somewhere within them, the answers she had been searching for were waiting. She moved quietly, keeping her head on a swivel, aware that someone could be lurking in the dark, watching her every move. Then she heard it. A door creaked open in the distance, followed by the sound of footsteps, deliberate and measured. Her pulse quickened. It was him, Jake. She had no idea how long he'd been part of the conspiracy, but she knew, deep down, that he had a role in this. Everything that had happened, all the manipulation, the lies, it had all come from him. He was the puppet master, the one pulling the strings. Did you really think you could find the truth? Jake's voice cut through the silence, sending a chill down her spine. He stepped out from the shadows, his face calm, almost too calm, like a predator ready to strike. You should have stopped long ago, but now it's too late. Her breath caught in her throat as she stared at him. For a moment, she wanted to believe he wasn't the one behind it all, that he was just a victim like her, but the coldness in his eyes shattered that illusion. This was personal. He had been playing her from the start, using her, manipulating her every move to keep her chasing the wrong leads. You were always in control, weren't you? She said, her voice steady despite the overwhelming fear. You led me to Rachel's disappearance, to the lies, to all of it. Jake chuckled, the sound unsettling, as if he took pleasure in her pain. I didn't lead you anywhere. You were the one who dug, who found the cracks in the story. You just didn't know which ones to follow. Her mind raced, but something clicked. The pieces began to fit together in a way that she had never expected. Jake wasn't the one behind Rachel's disappearance, not directly, but he had been protecting someone. Someone who had orchestrated everything from the shadows. The truth had been so much closer than she ever imagined. You're protecting someone, she said, the realization dawning on her like a floodlight illuminating the darkness. Who is it? Who's pulling the strings? Jake's face twisted into a sly smile, but there was a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. He didn't want to reveal the truth, but the pressure was mounting, and she could see the cracks in his composure. She was getting closer. You don't get it, do you? He said, stepping forward. You were never supposed to find out. This wasn't just about Rachel. It was never just about one child. It's about control. About power. And now you've gone and ruined everything. Just as he spoke those words, the doors to the warehouse slammed shut, and a voice came from behind her. He's right, you know. She spun around, her heart nearly stopping in her chest. There, standing in the doorway, was Emily, her best friend, the person she had trusted above all others. But there was no warmth in Emily's eyes now, no comfort, only cold calculation. Emily, what are you doing here? Her voice trembled, the shock of seeing her friend in this place overwhelming her. You're a part of this, too? Emily's lips curled into a sinister grin. I never wanted you to find out. But you had to, didn't you? You had to go digging and ruin everything. This isn't just about Rachel. This is about so much more than that. About everything we've built. The realization hit like a punch to the gut. Emily hadn't just been a bystander in this twisted game. She had been the architect. She had been playing both sides, feeding her false information, steering her toward dead ends.
But why?
Why had Emily been a part of all this? What was the motive? The answer came crashing down on her like a tidal wave. The conspiracy wasn't just about a missing child. It was about creating a network, an underground operation that manipulated people's lives, made them disappear, erased their identities, and used them as pawns in a far larger scheme. People like Emily and Jake weren't just accomplices. They were part of a larger network of corrupt individuals working to control lives, to bury secrets, to bury the truth. And now she had become their target. Before she could react, Emily moved closer, her eyes flashing with a dangerous intensity. You should have listened when I told you to stop. But now, there's no going back. You're a liability. A loose end that has to be tied up. Her hands were shaking, but she couldn't back down now. There was no more room for fear. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for every life that had been stolen, for every truth that had been buried. With one last glance at Emily and Jake, she made a decision. She wasn't going to let them win. She wasn't going to be a pawn in their twisted game. In that moment, as the tension hit its peak and the danger grew imminent, she did the only thing she could. She ran. As she sprinted out into the night, the world seemed to close in around her. But somewhere, deep down, she knew the truth was closer than ever. And this fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But the last twist came too quickly to process. As she ran into the night, the distant sound of an approaching car was too familiar. It was Emily's car. And she was coming for her. The night had felt like an eternity. The fear, the betrayal, the heart-stopping chase, all of it swirling together, creating a storm that threatened to consume her. But somehow, as the days passed and the dust settled, she found herself standing at the edge of the truth, gazing into the horizon. The events of the last few weeks had shattered everything she thought she knew, but they had also given her a clarity she never expected. It wasn't just about Rachel anymore, or even about the lies and manipulations that had haunted her every step. No, it was about something deeper, something that had been buried beneath the surface for far too long. The conspiracy, the network, the people behind it all, they were still out there. But she was no longer the person she once was. She had been broken and rebuilt, forged in the fire of her own pain and determination. In the days that followed, Emily's arrest had sent shockwaves through the community. The investigation into the underground network had gained momentum, leading to arrests and the unmasking of more faces than she ever could have imagined. It turned out Emily wasn't just a cog in the machine, she was one of its most influential players. She had used her charm, her friendship, to manipulate and deceive, and she had done it with a cold, calculating precision that left everyone in disbelief. But even as Emily was taken away, handcuffed and screaming for her freedom, the sense of relief was fleeting. It wasn't over. It would never be over. There were too many people still out there, too many untold stories, too many secrets that still needed to be uncovered. And even as the truth began to pour out like a torrent, it became clear that the conspiracy was much more than anyone had thought. The emotional toll on her had been immense. It wasn't just the fear for her own safety or the betrayal by those she had trusted most. It was the fact that Rachel, the girl she had once believed was lost forever, had been caught in the crossfire of something much darker than she could have ever imagined. The truth about her disappearance was far more complex than anyone had guessed. Rachel hadn't just vanished. She had been taken, manipulated into becoming part of the very network that had now been exposed. The girl who was once so full of life had become a pawn in a game far bigger than any of them. But through the process of piecing together the fragments of Rachel's life, a glimmer of hope emerged. Rachel had survived. And more than that, she had fought back. She had made a choice, to not just be a victim, but to become a force of her own. That realization brought her some peace, but it also left her with a sense of unfinished business. The truth wasn't all out yet, and the road ahead was still uncertain. But she had come to terms with the fact that sometimes answers come slowly, and peace is a hard-won victory. For now, she could rest, knowing that the most important part of this journey had been her own survival. And Rachel's. But the story didn't end there. As she sat in her small, quiet apartment, reflecting on everything that had happened, a notification flashed across her phone, an encrypted message from an unknown sender. Her heart skipped a beat as she read the cryptic words, "It's not over. We're still watching. There's more to the story than you know." For a moment, she stared at the screen, her mind racing. Could it be someone from the network, someone who had escaped justice? Or was it just another ghost from her past, trying to keep her trapped in the web of deceit? She didn't know. What she did know was that the world wasn't as simple as she had once believed. The truth wasn't something you could simply uncover and walk away from. It was a living, breathing thing, always shifting, always evolving. Her fingers hovered over the screen, and she debated whether to reply. She had thought about putting it all behind her, finding peace and walking away. But she couldn't. Not yet. Not when there were still unanswered questions. Not when the shadows of the past were still hanging over her. She had come this far, and there was no turning back now. The phone buzzed again, another message, even more cryptic than the first. You were never meant to uncover the truth. But now you've seen the pieces. What will you do with them? The question lingered in her mind long after the message disappeared into the abyss of her phone screen. What would she do with the pieces? How far was she willing to go to bring justice to those who had suffered? The story of Rachel, of Emily, of the conspiracy, it was just the beginning. There were more people, more stories, and more darkness that needed to be exposed. She had walked into a world of shadows, and there was no going back. But as the realization settled in, something else flickered within her. A sense of purpose, a drive she hadn't known she had. She wasn't just a bystander anymore. She was part of something much bigger. And whatever came next, whatever twists and turns the road ahead held, she would face them head-on. With a deep breath, she put her phone down, her resolve hardening. The story wasn't over. The truth wasn't finished. And as long as she was breathing, she would fight to uncover it, piece by piece, no matter where it led. The screen faded to black, the story hanging in the air, unfinished. The questions lingered, the mystery still alive. And as the credits rolled, one final message appeared. The truth is out there. But at what cost? The words echoed in the silence, leaving the audience to reflect on everything they had just witnessed, the mysteries they had unraveled, and the ones that were still waiting to be uncovered. And as the screen faded to black, the unsettling feeling remained. This wasn't just the end of a story. It was only the beginning.